Well, hello. Good afternoon. Welcome to Christian Concerns Round the Table. It's a special Christmas special. As you can see, I'm wearing a slightly Christmassy jumper, which proves to you that it is a Christmas special, no matter what else we cover in today's episode. Well, today we're really looking back at 2022, and we're giving thanks, which I think is really important, through the work of Christian Concern, through God's providence. So much has happened this year, and we want to celebrate it with you. We want to look back at all that's happened that God has achieved through us and with your support. I'm joined today by Tim Dieppe and by Andrea Williams.
Afternoon, Paul.
Hello. Hi there. Paul, you need to show us that Christmas jumper.
Okay, well, here's a bit more of it.
Christmas jumper.
Jingle all the way.
Yes, but he didn't jingle all the way into London yesterday. I can tell you that, even though I don't think it was an official strike day. The trains defeated him. The southwest trains, southeast. Which line? Yes, south. Yes, they defeated you into London. You didn't make it, and we had our office staff Christmas party, and Paul sent us all a picture with his jingle all the way jumper on, forlornly eating cold pizza. It wasn't a happy sight.
I don't think it's a very Christian Christmas jumper, though, Andrea. That's my problem with it. It's not very Christian, is it? You know.
Well, at least
we need to. I know what you mean, Tim, but we need a bit of jingle in life. Every now and then, we need to jingle some bells and
I thought we need a bit of Jesus. I thought we needed Jesus, Andrea.
Well, we do. That is the reason for the season, and we do love him very much. But it's quite fun to jingle at a party.
Anyway, as you can see, today's discussion is going to be very on point. We're going to get through lots of things today to celebrate what God has done this year, and the reason for that, this year I remember being struck by Psalm 50. At the end of Psalm 50, it says, "Those who sacrifice thank offerings honor me, and to the blameless I will show my salvation." And that psalm kind of really characterizes the people who God blesses as those who are those who are grateful and who are giving thanks. We are encouraged lots by our co-founder, Pastor Ade Muba, to have an attitude of gratitude, and that's what we wanted to do today. So if you're watching today, in the comments, tell us what you're grateful for to God for 2022. Let's see some of those comments. Oh, thank you, Peter. I'm very pleased to see that. Thanks for your partnership and for watching. So let's get through some of these things. There are so many things to look back on and to talk about that we need to cut to the chase. So first of all, we want to talk about the case of Mary Onuoha, a nurse back in January that was one then. Andrea, are you able to give some explanation of what happened there?
So, Paul, the way we're going to do this is to go through the year, really, and to remember cases pretty much chronologically, or cases and issues through the year. And I think that's sometimes something that happens to me here at Christian Concern. I get to the end of the week and remember that it was only Monday that we delivered a petition to Lambeth Palace asking the Education Department and the Archbishop of Canterbury to withdraw the Valuing All God's Children guidance. And this is the speed at which we work at Christian Concern. And sometimes it's quite astonishing to look back over the weeks and months and see all that God has achieved through our efforts and through the efforts of all of those that support us. And Pete Benjamin, by the way, I tried to reach you last week because I was hoping that you might come and deliver that petition with us too, but I think I might not have your latest number. So that's just letting you know there, Pete Benjamin, out there on the live stream. So back to January and Mary Onuoha. Well, we had a lovely nurse who'd been in this country for well over 20 years. She'd been working on the front line in nursing. She loved to wear her cross. She'd never taken off her cross. She actually worked at the senior level. She worked prepping people for operations. There was a change of management, and she was asked specifically to remove her cross. She refused to remove her cross. They even asked her to remove her cross within a situation where somebody was actually going into theatre. She was all completely dressed in all the gear for the operation. So even at that point, there was a particular manager that was really wanting this cross removed. We had at the time many images, many photographs, even on the official publicising material for the hospital, to show nurses and doctors indeed wearing other religious apparel, but also jewelry. She was put. She was then. There was essentially a long battle over. It spanned 2 years or so, where she was put on administrative duties, where she was sidelined, where we kept on trying to restore her back to the front line of nursing. So that's the story of Mary Onuoha. But in the end, we received the judgment last January, having had the trial in the autumn. And it was found that she had been directly discriminated against as a result of being asked. Well, she wasn't forced to take off the cross because she refused to take off the cross. But they found that that had been a case of direct discrimination against her. So that is a massive win. And also, can we just also remember that the truth about this is that issues around the cross have been going on for many, many years. We can go right back to the middle, 2004, 2005, the case of Nadia Awida and British Airways, and the way in which she, again, as an assistant, an air steward, dealing with the public, front-facing with the public as they checked in, she was working really hard, loving that job, but they asked her to remove her cross and said that the cross was not a Christian symbol. And some of you remember those extraordinary headlines of the kind of our national airline saying that the cross wasn't a Christian symbol. And then the case of
government. And the government.
And the government. Well, indeed, the government submitted at the European Court of Human Rights in 2013, specifically in the case of Nadia Awida, but also the case of Shirley Chaplin, another nurse, a beautiful, quiet lady from Exeter, who again had worn her cross for almost 30 years and worked in nursing. She was suddenly asked to remove her cross. The government submitted that the cross was not a Christian symbol, that it was a piece of jewelry, and that her freedom of religion was her freedom to resign. I'm really pleased that 20 years on, in effect, and that's how long it takes. But imagine if we hadn't stood 20 years on, no one's really arguing anymore in the courts. Well, they might try again, but they weren't arguing in the same way in the case of Mary Onuoha that the cross was not a Christian symbol. And now we also had a ruling that essentially it's a manifestation of faith. The cross and its symbolic value to Christians is a manifestation of faith. That's really important. And there is a manifest faith in that way.
Obviously, not all Christians wear a cross visibly, or these things, but the important thing is that Christians don't have to stop being Christians when they enter the workplace. And we want to keep people able to shine the light of Christ brightly in all those situations.
That's it. Absolutely.
We do have to move on to the next one, which Tim's going to talk about. So back in February and March, we were doing some work relating to care workers and NHS workers and mandatory vaccinations. Tim, do you want to explain what happened?
It's extraordinary, isn't it, to think that this was earlier this year, that the government was saying, look, if you haven't been vaccinated, you will lose your job, to people working in care homes and people working in the NHS as well. And we didn't take a position either way on whether you should or shouldn't have a vaccine. What we did take a position on is that people should have the right to choose. People should have the right to follow their conscience on it. And we felt very, very strongly that the government should not be mandating and forcing and on pain of losing your job, losing your whole livelihood, you must take this vaccine. If in conscience and some people have very good conscience reasons for not taking these COVID vaccines, and there are all sorts of questions being raised now about them over time. And but here we are, and people were threatened with losing their jobs over taking the vaccines, and we helped several clients about this and took up.
It wasn't even just several, Tim. It was tens and tens of clients,
dozens. Dozens of clients. And the great thing is, in the end, the government backed down and said, no, we're not going to force you all to lose your jobs. I think they realised they were going, there's a shortage of workers anyway. They're going to only exacerbate the shortage of workers by sacking everyone just for not taking this vaccine, which actually doesn't prevent transmission and doesn't prevent you getting it. It's not a vaccine in the ordinary sense of the word. So there was a win, although sadly some people did end up losing their jobs anyway as a result of that. But that was a big win. The government backed down, and it was a win for freedom of conscience for Christians and others.
And can I say on that one, Tim, as well, I want to talk about the people. The people who were exercising their conscience. They were beautiful people. Many of them, as you say, with good reason, and they were on the front line wanting to carry on, do their duty, working in care homes, working had perhaps had COVID, were immune, were taking it was the care of these people and the pressure that they were being put under. But this violation of conscience that is a really important principle that it's vital to.
That's right. Some of them had already had COVID, hadn't they, and could prove that they had the immunity in their system and stuff. So why have a vaccine then? I agree. Yeah.
So so much of what we did there was unseen, and yet we are very thankful to God for enabling us in all of that work, and eventually with the government's change of mind over that.
Can I say, Paul, I know we have to keep moving because we can't just stay. We can't. I don't know what time we're at, but we'll be here until midnight if we go this. If we imagine if we go through every week, if we take this long on every month. But I want to say there, look at the really important principles, which is what Christian Concern is always about. There's always a big principle behind our cases. It's always a Jesus principle, a Christian principle, which is a conscience principle, which is a freedom to proclaim faith, a freedom not to be compelled by the government to do something that is contrary to your conscience, in violation of your conscience, a freedom to proclaim Christ. And when conscience gets violated, when the government says you cannot, or you will be, in order to work, you will be mandated to believe, you will be mandated to do this to your body, you will be mandated to say, when these principles come in, when the government can mandate health principles or what is good or bad for you, if those are not challenged at the point at which they are being exercised or overridden by the government, if they're not challenged early and at that point, we will get much further down the track, as we've seen on many other issues. Yeah. But we'll get much further down the track, and it becomes very dangerous. That's why this win is so important, because it's actually what we don't know it prevented.
Totally. And you've got this situation of essentially the government saying, well, your rights, they are qualified. You don't have your human rights to the extent that they override public health and safety, etc. So it's exactly the same as what we had with COVID lockdowns in churches, saying, well, actually public health is more important than your freedom to worship, so we're going to stop that. And it's exactly what's being argued with conversion therapy bans and other things, where it's
imagine that exactly,
and abortion buffer zones too.
Exactly.
So there's always, all of our freedoms are overridden by public health and safety. And
yes, you cannot go to an abortion clinic. You cannot stand outside there in order to save the mother and baby. In order to save the baby, you cannot, because that the government mandates you not to go there when actually your motive is to save the life of the child. And also our motive is to love the mother, to love the woman. And this is, an extraordinary violation of freedom that the government is imposing. Similarly on the conversion therapy, it's all one big line. You cannot change. If a pastor, if a counsellor says you can change from sexual behaviour, or you can change from being same-sex attracted, that is toxic. That is bad for your health. That is forbidden. Well, that again is a overreach by the government. It's a direct attack on the gospel. And that's why we stand. All of these things are meshed. And I think sometimes in our work, Paul, when we work so fast, day in, day out, week in, week out, hour by hour, the big picture principle of what it's all about, I think what a lot of people see and what a lot of Christians even see is, it's another case. And so we get into the detail of a case of a nurse fired for praying, a street preacher arrested, when actually it's all about keeping the nation open for the good of the gospel, keeping Jesus Christ famous at the heart of our society, making him known at the heart of our society, jingling a very loud bell to say he rules, he reigns, it's Christmas time, and there's a reason for the season.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of saving lives outside clinics, well, Dr. Dermot, our next example, literally saving human babies and also providing better choice for mothers. So Dr. Dermot Kearney was cleared after offering life-saving support to women in crisis pregnancies who wanted to undo the effects of the first abortion pill. Andrea, let's come back to you on this. I mean, talk about Dermot and the real impact he had and this wonderful victory.
Well, what can I say? I'd love the world to be full of doctors just like Dermot. I really would. Yeah. He is such a wonderful man, such a kind, caring, compassionate doctor, so humble, so prepared to work through the night, to be called through the night, to look after a mum who takes an abortion pill and wants to reverse the situation. She immediately regrets it. He has saved well over 30 babies now as a result of that, because actually if progesterone is prescribed quickly, then there's a really strong chance that the mum will keep the baby. Excuse me, I've got a little cold today. It was fantastic that he was, after being hauled before the regulatory body, and after many months of pressure, that it was found that he had done nothing wrong, that actually his medical skills were truly excellent. And I think the shocking thing is that the abortion providers themselves are the ones that made him, well, it's not shocking, it's obvious that they are the ones that came after him, actually by dirty measures.
And they're still doing it.
And they're still doing it. They're still coming after him. They're still trying to do hit job pieces on him through the media, but he won't stop. And if there are any insurance brokers out there, just generally, we need to insure Dr. Kearney and we need to insure doctors everywhere. And we need to start clinics that were saying, we are here to save your babies. That actually, if you change your mind about having an abortion, having taken the first pill, that your baby can be rescued. So a mission, a desire of Christian Concern is to see clinics up and down this country saving babies, being the safe houses. And that's something we say, isn't it, Tim? Wherever we go, when we're out on the road speaking to churches, we say, will you be the life houses and the lighthouses? Will you bring this kingdom life news to the community?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, one of the important things about about his case is obviously not every baby is saved. So let's not take those first pills in the first place, ideally, and let's not have a culture that kind of accepts that and thinks that that's a normal thing to do. However, it's this enormously raised chance of the baby surviving, and in the case we even had evidence from at least one mother who had still lost her child but was still very grateful for the support.
Something that was so amazing about that particular story, because he's so non-coercive, and yet many choose to take the progesterone, and we've seen the babies that are saved, and he has hero status because he's been so kind. But even the ones that either choose not to take the pills, not to take the hormone, or where they lose the baby, they still are full of thanks for him. And this lady that you mentioned, I mean, it's really, I mean, she wrote and said, I was so grateful for everything that he did. And I'm calling, and she was calling one of her pets, you know, after him into all the, she worked in sort of, saving animals. I just think it's an incredible thing, isn't it? That people have this kind of love for this man, anybody that's worked with him. And the idea that the establishment continues to come after him is shocking. The first doctor, in a sense, to be prosecuted for actually trying to save lives.
Amazing. Yeah.
It was wonderful that it was cleared. So we give thanks to God for that.
We do.
On to Keith Waters. Tim, you're going to explain what's happened with Keith Waters back in April, I think it was.
Yeah, sure. So Keith Waters left a well-paid finance director job to go and work pastoring a church over in Cambridgeshire. And he took a job as a school caretaker to help fund his work pastoring this small church. And in his own personal capacity, he put out a tweet which was critical of pride events and said they're not good for children. And somebody in the community spotted this and reported it to the school where he worked. And he faced various harassment and issues on the street, but also did actually lose his job over that. So we helped him bring a discrimination case against the school, and fantastic win that we had in April this year, where the court ruled that he had been discriminated against for expressing his Christian faith. And so he was wrongfully dismissed there. And that serves as a helpful warning to other organizations that might think you can just dismiss somebody for expressing Christian beliefs on social media. That you can't just do that. You'll be discriminating and breaching their human rights by doing so. So a really important, significant victory there, and a good one. And building on, in a sense, Felix Ngole, which was another sort of highlight of the year a little bit, where Felix Ngole...
A little bit. It's a fantastic... all these highlights.
It happened a little bit this year.
Stay on track. He's later. He's later. Right. We'll get to talk about him later.
Nice. Okay, we'll save it for later if you want. Yeah.
It's wonderful though, isn't it? And Keith, and you know, both of those cases had to do with Facebook and Twitter and these sorts of things, and obviously pastors, right? Pastors who tent make, who have other jobs. How important is it that they are able to continue their role as pastors and do all of the things that we expect and hope our pastors will do, including speaking on important issues like these? How important is it that they get protection?
I know you're trying to keep Tim and I on track, Paul, but there we are. There you have Keith Waters. Again, a bit like Dermot, isn't it a privilege to know these men and women? And like Felix, that Tim couldn't resist mentioning. But I mean, it's such a privilege to know these men. Keith Waters is funny. That's what I enjoy. I mean, he has this most wonderful sense of humor. What I mean is he's just funny. When I'm with him, I laugh. And he really, really loves the Lord. And the thing for me about Keith is he is doing what the bishop should be doing. It was Ely Cathedral that were blessing pride and welcoming pride. And he was telling the Christians in Ely to stay away from pride. So you have a true Christian leader, Keith Waters, head to head with the Bishop of Ely. And who do you want? Which one do you want to be your bishop? Bishop Keith for me. I mean, not his theology, but he is a man who's a true elder. He's a man who's fit to teach. And the Bishop of Ely should have been disciplined and in fact removed. And what we have in the Church of England is, for the past 10 years, since Justin Welby came into position, and now a man who cannot make a clear statement on same-sex marriage, he says he's not going to let his views be known. 10 years later, he says he's an evangelical. What does that mean? 10 years later, the first bishop of the bishops, the Archbishop of Canterbury, the leader of the Anglican Communion, says he's not going to let his views be known on same-sex marriage. He can't make a statement on it. He doesn't discipline the bishops who speak against it. in the city where Keith Waters lost his job for tweeting about the protection of children. It's really serious. And in fact, what a true bishop or a true archbishop would have done is come behind Keith Waters and ensure that we never had such a case.
Yeah, it's remarkable that the silence of the Church of England on some of our cases has been remarkable. And speaking of the Church of England, our next case is our next victory, Nigel and Sally Rowe, who you talked about earlier on, delivering a petition earlier this week. What happened there in September, Andrea?
Well, I mean, this has been a case. I mean, many of our cases, and I want to thank all of those that are listening and watching. I just want to thank you for staying with us. Thank you for staying with us day in, day out, year in, year out. Because the case of Nigel and Sally Rowe, it's taken 5 years. They have become part of the Christian Concern family. That's the truth. They were with us, as I say, this week. But 5 years ago, before we had all the controversy around mermaids, before we had all the noise in the space around transgenderism and the harm, they saw what it was doing in their local school. Their children became upset by it. It was actually in a Church of England school. They raised an issue because they were concerned not just for their children, but for all of the children in this little school in the Isle of Wight. All of the school's policies, the sporting policies, the toileting policies were being changed in order to accommodate 1 and then 2 and then 3 children. So it's very confusing. When asked for support by the Church of England Diocesan Education,
about 6-year-olds as well, Andrea.
Yes,
primary
school children.
6-year-olds who are being allowed to identify as the opposite gender when they felt suit, and then all the other children in the class were told, you must call him her on those days when they identify the opposite gender.
Yes. And then, of course, so then the idea then that the letter that came back to them was that unless they could accept that the 6-year-old or the 8-year-old was in the acquired gender, in the so-called acquired gender, then they were transphobic, that they were bigoted and transphobic. And again, the Church of England did nothing to assist or to back them up.
Well, they did the opposite. They backed up the school. They did the opposite. They backed up the school. They came against them.
And Nigel Genders, who's the head of the education on the national level, he too did that. And so what you have is and during prior to this case, we'd also had the case of John Parker, who'd sought to again expose mermaids' involvement in a school.
Well, he was later, wasn't he? He was 2018, I think. Oh,
2018. Sometimes this is the thing. So he was a little bit. So he was later. So Nigel and Sally, you're right, were the very first ones. Again, and that was under Stephen Cottrell, now the Archbishop of York. He didn't support them. The Archbishop of Canterbury hasn't supported these parents and other parents that have stood with them. So, but quite extraordinarily, by sheer persistence, 5 years on, having got together, I believe, the most brilliant evidence, the most brilliant peer-reviewed evidence from experts across the world. It's a report that runs to thousands of pages, which brings together scientific studies, social science studies, which show outcomes on children and on adolescents if they are affirmed in the wrong gender. And those outcomes are very poor. So it's really poor social practice to promote a policy where our children are harmed. I mean, we know this biblically anyway, but all the social science proves it. And we got a promise from the government to review their guidance.
And you've got this amazing situation where the government has moved on it and has recognised these things, even though back in 2016, then people were sort of laughing at the Rose or us, like, oh, why are you so hung up about a little boy dressing up in a skirt?
Well, I think the Archbishop of Canterbury actually said, I remember the headline. I mean, Justin Welby actually said during that time, there's no harm in the dressing up box, but this is not dressing up box stuff.
No, not at all.
This is really deep. This is heaping trauma upon trauma. This is, sadly, affirming a little child that won't.
It's actually child abuse. It's actually child abuse. To say you can change gender, you say you're born in the wrong body, it's child abuse.
And you've now got the Church of England's guidance, Following All God's Children, which we were delivering this petition about on Monday, still in the same place. The government's moved. Government started recognising some of these things.
Yeah.
The wider society is recognising it. Mermaids is under all kinds of problems, and the Church of England still, yeah, it's all fine. Nothing to see here.
And to be clear, just for everyone listening, that at the Valuing All God's Children guidance for Church of England schools, including primary schools, does basically say or endorse affirming children in an acquired gender. Yeah. And it's a real problem, and it's been used against Christians like Nigel and Sally Rowe and many other Christian teachers and parents as well, saying the Church of England says this is fine, we should be doing this. So it's a real menace.
It's raised as a matter of course. That guidance and the Church of England stand is raised as a matter of course, not just in the high-profile cases, but continually in the cases that we deal with that are under the radar in schools, to show where the Church of England is, to undermine true biblical teaching, to undermine parents that truly want the protection of their children. So actually, we need to keep on writing to our bishops on this. We need to keep on writing to Nigel Genders on this, who heads up education at the Church of England. We need to keep on doing it. And I see that Pete Benjamin is commenting, and he's part of our Christian Concern family. I mean, do go and look at his video. We've got a video that shows Pete's story of someone who lived out in the opposite sex for a number of years. He thought that it would provide him with the in terms of living out and in the opposite sex. He thought that it would make all his problems, his issues, go away, and in fact, it just made it worse.
But all his story also goes back to his childhood, doesn't it? And the things that happened in his childhood in terms of dressing up and these sorts of issues. So,
and Pete will be the first to say that the traumatizing thing is it's even things like pantomime dames and drag queens, this kind of thing. Yeah. And of course, we've got drag queens in our libraries and drag queens in our schools. Pastors out, drag queens in.
But we give thanks for the again to God that actually some real movement has happened in this. Real
movement has happened. It was a victory for Nigel and Sally Rowe. The government are going back to the drawing board on this. They're going to review and change their guidance as a result of Nigel and Sally's stand. And what we are, again, we want to make Jesus famous in schools. In Church of England schools, we want his name made known. In our schools, in our state schools, we want to reinstate assembly, where Jesus Christ is known. We want Christian schools to be raised up and down the country, where we will see his name made known. We want to see him at the heart of society once more.
Absolutely. And we're obviously very involved in Christian education with Steve Bigu, who heads up that work for us, really helping Christian schools and Christians within education to make a difference where they are. But another area where we're building for the future is the Wilberforce Academy, which has had its own cases this year with its situation with Worcester College amongst them, but also just happening in September. A wonderful thing. I wasn't there. Andrea, you were. What's encouraged you about the Wilberforce Academy this year?
Well, Tim, whatever is it that we can say about it? How wonderful is the Wilberforce Academy?
Yeah, it's always a huge highlight of the year. We have a whole group, like 80 plus, very keen, enthusiastic young people, young professionals at the start of their career, keen to sort of work out how to apply their Christian faith in the workplace, in their spheres of influence. And they come and they get a week-long intensive crash course with top speakers and fantastic teaching and discussion groups around their areas of career progress, and it's really so engaging and so encouraging to see the next generation rising up and with passion and enthusiasm and hunger to learn, and a sort of a bit of a sense of why has nobody told me this before as well. That goes on there. Fantastic.
I think that's one of the things about it, isn't it, Tim? One of the hardest things about it's truly wonderful to spend a week away with these amazing young people. Many of them are in church, have been in church for a number of years. Not all of them, but they often say, "No one's told us about this," and they're so hungry to talk about the cultural hot topics of the day. And what I say is the issues where the gospel is under attack. And they feel so delighted to be able to be free to talk about issues of identity, issues of human sexuality, issues of other religions, cultural Marxism. All of these things they talk about and they unpack through the week.
Yeah, euthanasia, abortion as well, Christian view of law, Christian view of work, Islam, secularism, all of these topics. So it's a fantastic highlight. The young people very often say this is a transformative week. Some cases like the most significant week of my life. They make career-changing decisions sometimes as a result of it, and they become part of a community that maintains contact and meets up every so often, and we have refocus days for them as well. So yes, a real highlight, always a highlight. If you know somebody who would benefit from this, we will be opening up applications, I think, in January. So watch this space for that for the coming September when we will do another one.
I mean, the Wilberforce Academy is the Hope Academy.
Yeah.
When I think of 11 years on, 11 years of graduates, I want to say, Lord, raise up these young men and women. Put them into places of great influence, I pray, for your kingdom purposes. Jesus, may your name be famous in and through these next generations. They are absolutely wonderful. They're fiery. They love him. They're uncompromising.
Yeah,
absolutely. And when we're able to see these messages, in these groups and see all of the amazing things they're doing. That we don't get to put out on Christian Weekly News, or there are too many things going on to really to say it all. But they are really active and seeking to make Jesus known. Quickly on to street preachers. We've had a number of street preacher wins this year. Two particular ones that we've highlighted: Hatton, Tash, and John Dunn. Tim, tell us about street preacher freedom.
Yes, so Hatton is a fantastic evangelist to Muslims. She goes and preaches in Speaker's Corner and debates and discusses with the Muslims there. She's got quite a provocative style, very happy to say things like Muhammad is a false prophet, and things like that, and even wear provocative cartoons and things. The Muslims occasionally have assaulted her, threatened her, stolen a book off her, and never been arrested. And Hatton has been arrested.
But one of them we've got on video where they actually went for the vein in the neck.
Yes, one time she was actually stabbed, and it was like a miracle that she wasn't actually killed, because the intention was clearly to try and kill her that time. Again, that person has not been arrested or apprehended either. But Hatton has been arrested for doing nothing wrong, and she's never been charged. There's never brought a charge against her, but they've arrested her, sometimes searched her, sometimes removed her reading glasses so she can't even read in the cell, and killed her overnight. And so we've challenged the police about this and said this is wrongful arrest and wrongful detainment and so on. And a fantastic win, because the Met Police eventually issued an apology, a formal apology, and paid £10,000 towards the legal costs of taking this up with the police. So that's an admission of wrongdoing by the police, and obviously significant compensation paid by them as well. Now, what we really hope for and what we're really working for as well behind the scenes is for a change of culture there in the police, that they decide that this is not the way to do it. They should be arresting the people who are threatening and abusing and sometimes assaulting her, not arresting her because she is not the one doing something wrong. They are the ones doing something wrong. So this is a really big deal, and really pleased with that conversation and that apology from the police there. for Hatem Tash. And then more recently, street preacher John Dunn was preaching and got arrested because a couple complained that he's being allegedly homophobic in what he said. All he did was quote the Bible one or two places with them. And anyway, so they complained and the police arrested him. I mean, why do they arrest him just because someone complains it's offensive? That is not a crime. Anyway, he's arrested and charged. And the Crown Prosecution Service actually argued in their legal argument that parts of the Bible are no longer appropriate in a Christian society, in a modern society rather. In other words, that quoting the Bible could be a criminal offence. Quoting the Bible on the streets could be a criminal offence in the UK. Now, this case did not actually get to court because the couple who had complained ended up saying, oh, forget it, and then refused to testify in court. So it didn't get to court, but the Crown Prosecution Service had already made their legal argument and tried to argue that quoting the Bible would be a criminal offence. So that's significant to highlight that. And then a member of the House of Lords, Kate Huey, asked a question of the government, which just got answered only this week. And the government, what she was asking, were the Crown Prosecution Service right to say quoting the Bible is a criminal offence? And the government said no, they were wrong. Crown Prosecution Service has recognised that was wrong, and they've changed it, and there was a mistake and should not have happened. So that's a significant victory then, because the Crown Prosecution Service, because we exposed it. Imagine if we hadn't exposed it, this would have carried on and it would have come up in another time. But because we exposed it, the Crown Prosecution Service has been held to account and have had to admit they made a mistake and should not have said that. And therefore, that quoting the Bible is not a criminal offence in the UK today.
So what's absolutely wonderful here again, just let's go to big picture stuff. It's about keeping the highways and the byways open for the gospel. It's about keeping people not being able to say bits of the Bible can't be quoted. They are offensive, and those should never be in the public space. That's what this is actually about. That is about keeping Jesus's name free to be spoken of in not just in public spaces, but in Parliament.
You've got Sean O'Sullivan there commenting from Facebook saying John Dunn is the reason I got saved.
I know. So I want to actually say as well, Sean O'Sullivan, John Dunn, you are amazing. Because John Dunn was on the street, Sean Sullivan, living a life of addiction and homelessness, got saved. Now Sean Sullivan is literally out there with John Dunn, seeing life saved. When I met Sean the first time, he was carrying 2 sleeping bags in order to give to the homeless people that he meet between Swindon and here. These men are the real deal. They're all the real deal. It's been the privilege of lifetime. I will go to my grave and I will say that one of the greatest privileges of my lifetime is to have been in a place whereby we can stand with men like John Dunn, we can stand with Sean O'Sullivan, we can see the life-changing stories and see people saved as a result of them. And if we lose on the street preaching situations, well, next again, it's the government encroachment, it's the state encroachment. Next, it's coming in anyway, but it's into churches, it's into schools, and that's why it's so important to win these street freedoms. I'm really proud to stand with you, Sean O'Sullivan. Thank you for listening today. I'm really proud to stand with you, John Dunn. And
we did a great interview of them. We did a great interview of one of them on one of the earlier podcasts.
Yeah, so we should make sure that's
2 weeks ago. I think it was 2 weeks ago, and it was a really wonderful session where they both shared so much of
great testimonies. Loved it.
Through their work. So do go back and listen to that and watch listen and watch those, along with all these other ones. In most of these stories, if not all of them, we've got round the tables on, and it's well worth listening to those. And of course there were other street preachers, Andy Sithievan amongst them, and Sean O'Sullivan himself. I think another case that happened this year. So it was wonderful to have that. However, I want to end with one other positive story, which we've already mentioned, of Felix. What happened with Felix this year, Andrea?
He graduated.
Yeah. Yeah, no.
So Felix Ngole, who'd been originally thrown off his course in order to become a social worker, at Sheffield University. Again, another long battle where in the end he was vindicated. He was thrown off the course because he posted the truth about marriage in a Facebook discussion. He was taken off the course. Ultimately, it was found at Court of Appeal level. Well, if you take Felix off the course, then you're going to have to take Mother Teresa off the course. I'm sort of shorthanding all of that, but read because Felix is essentially expounding biblical truth. He's expounding the biblical position. The best thing of all is that they also found that Felix was never found to have discriminated against anybody. Know why? Because again, anybody that knows Felix and anybody that knows his wonderful wife, Pepsi, will know that they are full of the love of Jesus, that anyone that they work with and all the people that Felix has cared for have nothing but the utmost respect and love for him. A bit like when I speak of any patient of Dermot's, Dermot Kearney, nothing but utmost love and respect for them. And the best thing of all was to see Felix walk that stage and fall on his face in thankfulness to God in front of the Chancellor of Sheffield University, in front of all the graduands who were graduating with him. He was giving glory to God. Well, that's Felix Ngole. What a man. He's actually changed. I mean, in terms of academic freedom. This is all about the big picture of academic freedom. You cannot have a viewpoint discrimination. If you post something and the academies don't like it, well, we're fighting back on this. And this Felix's case is really important on that score. So say with Worcester College, when they tried to shut us out and we got the win on that, it's all about the doors have to stay open for those of us that believe.
And Felix's case was lost. Was it lost at the High Court, and then it was overturned at the Court of Appeal? Yeah.
Yes.
So one of the Court of Appeal is one of the highest courts in the country.
Absolutely, binding precedent. Yes. And
so and I see it quoted in lots of our other cases and many other cases in other areas. So really important.
Christian and honesty, Paul. It is our cases across, this, well over a decade now are writing legal history. And every one of them is about standing for truth. Every one of them is about contending for truth. We are standing in the gap to keep the light of Christ shining in this nation. And so if you look at employment law and freedom laws, freedom of conscience, freedom of religion, our cases are all over. They're all over the place. They are the leading cases. Well, I thank God for that. What an honor. What an honor. Who could ever have imagined it? And there's a sense in which it is only God. What was required of us was to stand. It was to stand. Where there was injustice, where they wanted us to be silent, where they wanted us not to contend, we stood. We stood to proclaim his name. We stood with the people who were prepared to take the risk for his name, who were prepared to lose their jobs, who were prepared to be arrested. We stood with them. We stood with them because we love Jesus. They love Jesus. We love them. And we don't want the lights in this nation to go out. We don't want freedoms to be dimmed. We know that with Jesus, with Christ, with Christian freedoms, with Christian truth comes freedom, true toleration, a true understanding of human identity, a true compassion, a true kindness, a true answer, a true hope. And that is, of course, the meaning of the season, which we will jingle about. But of course, we will jingle about it. But it's a massive jingle. It's that Jesus is the hope for each one of us. But we can't shrink Jesus to personal faith, which we kind of put on and off like a jingle jumper. No. Jesus is Lord of everything, Lord of the workplace, Lord of our families, Lord of our communities, Lord of our nation. And that's what Christian Concern is all about.
Absolutely.
May the Lord grant us more years.
Yeah. And we give thanks to him for all of these things. And obviously we've had to kind of only talk about each of these cases very briefly. And there are so many other things that have happened this year. We focused on kind of the victories, the kind of the places where we've had key breakthroughs, but there are lots of things that are still going on. Case of Christy Higgs, Christian school worker who had lost her job after Facebook posts about contents for relationships and education, these sorts of things. There's a big victory in that case as well, but we don't have time to explain it. Maureen Martin lost her job relating because of her political stance relating to marriage. David Mackworth's case still goes on with all of that. Bernard Randall, the chaplain at a school who lost his job, that case was heard. We're waiting for the judgment in that. And of course, the most high-profile case probably of our year, the case of Archie Battersby and his mother Holly Dance. Obviously, there was a sad end to that story, but it's not the end yet, because we're still contending for those principles relating to the end of life and making sure that that those beliefs about the end of life are upheld, that we don't shift the line in favour of death in certain ways. So we're grateful to God also for all of those cases and the things that have happened in those that have been positive. And so many more cases behind the scenes, as Andrea knows.
Bernard Randall. I mean, Bernard Randall is also very high profile, and we're waiting for the judgment in that one. And Church of England minister in a Church of England school preaching a Church of England sermon loses his job. But there are many Church of England chaplains under immense pressure. He actually represents one of many. So chaplaincies in school are under massive pressure. Pastoral service in schools is under massive pressure. Yeah.
So one of the unique things about Christian Concerns Ministry and Christian Legal Centre, which I'm so grateful for, is the way that these cases come together with the work in the media, making sure these cases are heard about, making sure that people don't forget about these issues, which happens if they aren't in the media. And the way those two bits come together in some of these cases, in many of these cases, alongside kind of campaigning on public policy issues, which Tim in particular is involved in, consultations, fighting against conversion therapy, ban, efforts on abortion. It all comes together in this really unique way, and we're really thankful to God for the way he's enabled us to do that. And he's enabled us to do that through people like you who are watching. Your prayers, your support, the comments that you put in there, they're really encouraging to us, and they really help this thing happen. It wouldn't be possible without you. So it's us together as a Christian Concern community, those of you who are watching, those of you who support our work in every kind of way, us, and of course God's amazing providence for us. I do want to say, on the back of all of this, if you're in the comments, you haven't joined up to our email list, please do make sure you do, because that's where you really hear about these things, how you find out how you can take really important actions to make Jesus known in society. You can sign up at christianconcern.com/hello, as it says below. But I also want at this Christmas time to point out, we do require your support financially as well, wherever possible. God's been amazingly gracious to us in terms of keeping us able to do this work through the support of ordinary people. So if you're listening to this and you're grateful to God for what's been done through us, and you can make a gift, please do. You can go to christianconcern.com/donate there, and we'd really value that, because we need it. We could do a whole session, Andrea, couldn't we, on how God's provided for us over and over again in these kinds of ways, just financially in terms of our organization. But that would take another hour at least. So much more, yes. So we thank God for all of that, of course, as well, and thank God for you. Any final things from you, Andrea or Tim, as we close up for the year around the table?
I'm just grateful for an amazing amount that has been achieved by God's grace through this year. Really, I think it's incredible looking back on it, and like you said, there's so much more one could talk about. But really, it's been an incredible year, and a year of really taking things forward and victories, and proclaiming, and on honor to do it, and honor to stand for the church and for Jesus doing this.
Amen. Andrea, final words.
Paul and Tim, thank you. As members of the team, thank you to the whole, also to those that are backstage behind this live stream. I'm so grateful for the Christian Concern team, the Christian Legal Centre team. What an honour to do this work. And for those of you that are listening, thank you for standing with us. We love the Lord Jesus and we want to make him known. Let's walk into 2023 contending and loving him and serving him with full hearts. God bless you all. Have the most wonderful Christmas, and let's get going into the new year.
Thank you.
That's a brilliant way to close. Thanks, Andrea. Thanks, Tim. And we'll see you all in 2023.
Great.